but that's not going to fill the whole time. So what I'd like to do is talk about, other than that, talk about anything you want. So, think about questions you have, whether it's about, my background, stuff that I studied, where I've worked, what we do at Canaan, what's in the venture capital industry, what about entrepreneurship and startup companies, things I did in school, what mattered, what didn't. All of those are fair topics. So, think about questions, okay? So my connection with Bellarmine is that my younger son went here. He graduated last June. How many of you guys know Connor Young or know of him? Anybody? It's good to see you left a legacy.
Maybe if I saw him.
So Connor is, when Connor was here, he played hockey and lacrosse, and he was the goalie for both the hockey team and the lacrosse team for the past 3 years. Right now, he is a freshman at Cornell University in the engineering school there, which happens to be my alma mater. So let me, I just have a few different slides here that might help go over some stuff. What I'm going to do is first go to a slide on me, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my background. So I was born and raised in the Midwest. I was born in Michigan, and I grew up in 3 different cities in Ohio, the Chicago area, Western New York. And from where I graduated from high school in the Buffalo area, I ended up going to college at Cornell. And one of the things that I knew by the time I was graduating from high school was that I was pretty good in math and science, and I was not very good in social studies. Things like English.
Adam Brown to the debate office, please. Brown to debate.
English, writing, history, and all that stuff was not a strong suit of mine. So I thought I would go to engineering school and I'd really, kind of focus on places that I had some skills. So I got a bachelor's in mechanical engineering at Cornell. When I was in engineering school, one of the things that I sort of figured out was I probably wasn't going to be an engineer, like a design engineer or manufacturing engineer, for my entire career. I was really interested in business-oriented stuff. So rather than going to work as an engineer for some number of years, I decided to go on and get an MBA, Master's in Business Administration, from Kellogg School, which is Northwestern University in the Chicago area. When I was at Northwestern, I had what was one of my big breaks as a young person from a career standpoint, and General Electric came and found me when I was there. They actually contacted me, and they were looking for young people in the top MBA schools in the country who were potentially interested in coming to work for GE in certain roles in operations or out in the different lines of business in the field that would help develop what they felt were, strong general management talent. And I thought that was interesting, so I went and did that. Went to work initially for their transportation business, which is best known for building locomotives. I was actually working in another line of business in the same facility, doing marketing and product management type work. After that, I transferred inside of GE into another business, which was the service and repair of industrial products, big power generation oriented things like turbines and transformers and switchgear, pumps, compressors, things like that. I purposely went to that business because at the time it was organized as a relatively large number of smaller P&L centers, profit and loss, and I was going to have the opportunity to run one of those operations, at age, call it 23, 24, as a general manager. And I thought that would be a really good experience for me, and so I chose to go do that. I worked in this business for about 2.5 or 3 years, and GE's headquarters knew about me, and at the time they were intending this business, the venture capital investment business inside of GE, existed, but it was really small. Just a few different people worked there. And they went through kind of a key inflection point. This is actually when Jack Welch was promoted to chairman and CEO. They decided to expand this operation and started looking for a handful of people within GE who had technical backgrounds, who had business leadership training and experience, who could come and join this. And so I got a call from here, and they said, "Are you interested in this?" And I said, "Sure, I am." Went and interviewed and ended up joining GE Venture Capital. I worked there for about five and a half years, and what happened was Jack Welch decided that he did not want to keep running this business as something that GE owned outright, and talked with us about looking at alternatives. One of the things that my partners and I, and this was a very small operation, about 12 people or so as far as investment professionals, one of the things that we wanted to do was keep doing what we were doing because we really enjoyed it, but that really meant doing it outside of GE. And so we proposed to Mr. Welch that we would like to spin out and create a brand new partnership entity that would continue doing the same kind of early stage venture capital investing that we had been doing for GE. And if we were able to do that with his blessing, that we would help him with the portfolio of companies that we had invested in while we were at GE. And he said that was okay with him. And so in 1987, myself and three other individuals spun out of GE and created Canaan Partners at that point. So from the start here, which was 1982, to today, that's 34 years of venture capital investing experience. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we do at Canaan in terms of venture capital investing, but we're a technology-oriented firm. I've made a number of investments. These are all logos of portfolio companies that I've led the investments in either for Canaan or for GE. And they tend to be in these types of industries. So in the information technology industry, for the most part, a little bit in power and energy technologies. But that's kind of my background experience-wise. When I was working for GE in these two businesses, I was located both back east and here in the Bay Area. Then I went back east again for the start of this, but I've been living here in the Bay Area since 1982 at this juncture, so a long time in the Bay Area. Let me stop there. Any questions about my background, where I've been, what I've done, school? Yeah.
So basically you're an engineer and a business administrator, and you put all that together into one?
Yeah, I have both of those degrees, and so I have training, from an academic standpoint in both of those areas. It has been so long since I've practiced mechanical engineering that I'm unqualified today to go work as an engineer in today's economy. But I'll talk a little bit more about Canaan and the kind of things that we do. The combination of these skills, the ability to work with people who are very technical and to be able to communicate with them and interact with them, understand what they're doing, is very important. But we're in the investment business, and our job is to invest in companies and make a profit, in terms of those investments. And so it's important to have an understanding of, business situations, business skills, what really matters in terms of building successful companies that happen to be based on technology. Anybody else? Yeah.
And so why did you decide to first get into the venture capital in GE?
So when I was in business school, and this was in the 1978 to 1980 timeframe.
Nicholas Weisblum, please come to the attendance office. Thank you.
Hopefully that's none of you. The venture capital industry existed, but it was very small compared to today. So I first became aware of it here and started, I heard about it and I studied it a little bit in school, and I thought, that's pretty interesting. It's, something that attracted me. And frankly, when I got my MBA and, I had graduated and I could kind of go any place, one of the places I really wanted to end up was here in Silicon Valley because it was, the hotbed of technology innovation and new company development. So, being in the middle of all of that was interesting. One of the reasons that I went and took these work experiences was that I knew that to be a venture capital investor, it was important to have a good firsthand understanding of how companies operate, how they're run, what people do that work in companies, especially startup companies. So I had this as sort of a goal somewhere out there over the horizon, but I knew I had to go pay my dues first. Frankly, when this call came from headquarters, I never expected it. I didn't even know that this thing existed within GE. I was really, building my resume so that someday I could be, prepared or qualified for the venture capital business. And what I was learning along the way was that venture capital was working with entrepreneurs, which I was starting to learn that I liked in terms of the nature of those kinds of people. And it was working with very new things, innovative technologies, things that are not, yesterday's stuff, but really tomorrow's, prospects in terms of new things. And I found that to be very interesting. One of the other things that I learned from this experience inside of GE, inside of their large established lines of business, compared to working with startups, is that I really didn't enjoy working in a big company. Going to the same place every day, working on the same big project every day, kind of one foot in front of the other, you're just sort of monotonically pushing something along. To me, it was very boring. And one of the things about the venture business, you can see there's lots of different businesses, and these companies are all very different from one another. Lots of different areas that I've worked in, and this is just the major parts, separate and apart from small things that I've dabbled in over the years. It provides a lot of variety. For me, every day is different in terms of both the challenges and the problems, but also the areas that I need to learn about. Things that are really new, on the horizon, things that may or may not be important, but you better understand it when you think it's coming. So I love that, always learning aspect about what I'm doing for a living. So that's kind of how I, saw the venture capital attraction along the way. And for me, getting into it here was really good luck. It was because I was, out there doing a good job and some people knew about me. I got a phone call one day, which turned out in my career, in terms of almost 40 years worth of experience, that was my lucky break. And a few other things have happened along the way that, have worked well. But, you have to be mindful of the fact that, working hard, putting yourself in those situations sometimes makes for good luck, occasionally. Any more questions? Yeah.
Segueing directly from Cornell to Kellogg, did you find that transition beneficial without any work experience, or?
It was a conscious decision I made at the time. With the benefit of hindsight, it was the wrong thing to do, and I'll explain why. Today, it's unheard of. And all of the top business schools won't let you do that, and it's for good reason. The reason I purposely went straight on, and I contemplated going to work for a couple of years and then going back to get an MBA. I actually had, the place I really wanted to go was Stanford, and Stanford gave me a deferred acceptance here, but they said, go work for 2 years and then we'd love to have you. And I passed that up, and the reason was because, when I was at Cornell, I had no money, and I had student loans, and I was graduating, and I was deathly afraid. I had all these job offers as an engineer. I went and interviewed just to see what I could get, and I was deathly afraid that if I went to work and I started getting accustomed to an income, I wouldn't leave it to go back to school. And I knew that I would never do it part-time. I had to go full-time and just get it done. So I decided I'm going to get it done. The reason it was the wrong thing to do is that, engineering school is rigorous. There's a lot of well-defined, things you have to do, labs, project sets, and all that stuff. MBA school is very different. What you learn there is very much a function of what you bring into it in terms of your experiences. And so that's why all of the top MBA schools really, really encourage people to go get work experience in between. Because it's some of that seeing things in the real world that you bring there that gives you a backdrop for being able to understand, because it's much more shades of gray and, kind of understanding, well, on one hand you could do this, but on the other hand you could do that. And being able to understand the subtleties, really counts on your experiential basis. So, I did it, I got it, I learned. I didn't learn as much here, though, as I could have, if I'd gone off and worked for 2 or 3 years. So it is what it is at this juncture. Was there another question back there? Yeah.
What was it like working outside of the Bay Area?
Different. It's this experience, this one in particular, the big difference was not so much Erie, Pennsylvania versus, Menlo Park, California. It was being an employee of a company with 300,000 employees with a line of business that did, several $1 billion per year of revenue with, employee base that didn't change much. A product line that changes in decades as opposed to in quarters, like we're accustomed to here. The pace, the rate of change, the degree of innovation, it just, it's what a big company has to do because they work on big stuff that requires that degree of resource and continuity. I just found it boring. So, a lot of the high-tech companies that exist in this part of the world in particular, you can find them elsewhere, but Silicon Valley is the preeminent place for a lot of this innovation. The pace of change is so much greater. Things happen so much faster. I love it. I thrive on it, but some people need a little more continuity or predictability. So, anyway, should I talk about Canaan for a couple minutes? Sure. All right. So, we're in the venture capital investment business. As I mentioned, we were started as a management-led spin-out or buyout of GE Venture Capital. That was 29 years ago. Since that time, we've raised a total of 10 funds or 10 pools of capital. You can see them listed across there. The most recent one was Canaan 10 that was raised in 2015. Canaan 11 will be raised sometime next year. Probably toward the latter part of the year, it'll be all done. In total, we manage about $4.2 billion. Each one of these pools of capital has a finite size to it. Canaan 10 was $675 million. The one before that was $600, $650. The next one will probably be about $650, $700, $750, something like that. What we do with that capital is we go to institutional investors. These are university endowments, pension funds, foundations, insurance companies. These are very large organizations that have money that they have to manage on an ongoing basis over time. And they put some of that money into stocks and some of it into bonds and some of it into real estate, but they put some of it into what they call alternative assets and private equity. Private equity just means you're buying stocks in companies that are private as opposed to publicly traded. A part of private equity is venture capital. And venture capital means you're buying stock privately in private companies. And venture means early stage. So these are newly formed companies, just getting started. There's tons of examples of them here in Silicon Valley. I'm sure you're all familiar with them. But when we raise a new fund, we get all of these institutional investors to commit certain amounts of capital, and they commit those amounts contractually to us. So once we close and they sign their documents, we have the right to take that money. and they can't walk away. They can't change their mind. They can't say, well, things have changed. So we have a certain amount of money that's guaranteed that we can invest. Then what we do is, over the course of the next 10 to 15 years, we take that money and we invest it in startup companies. And the idea is to buy low and eventually sell high. It's a risky business. Lots of these startup companies will fail. In many cases, we'll invest and get nothing back or a fraction of our money back. But sometimes when they work, when they're very, very successful, we can get very large multiples of our initial investment back. And those outcomes are what help make these funds successful. Our objective, though, against an amount of money like that, is to ultimately give back to our investors through distributions of either cash or stock, an amount that is about 3 times that amount. So it's very lucrative over time, but it's the sort of thing that has to be done on a portfolio basis. Canaan 10 will probably have something like 50 to 60 different companies that have been invested in it over time. And it's the sort of thing that'll take us 15 years or maybe a little more to eventually get all of those investments made and then get everything back that we can to distribute to our limited partners. We invest in both technology and healthcare. Technology means mostly information technology, and today most of that is software and services. So things like cloud, internet, data center technologies, services of an information nature. Those are the kind of things that we're doing today. Healthcare is mostly drugs, pharmaceuticals, and biologicals. A little bit medical devices, a little bit in healthcare IT, so if you think of Fitbit-like devices, but most of it is drugs and biologicals. We invest in very early stage companies, so typically when they're just getting started, within the first year or so of activity. We like to take fairly large ownership positions. We're very active investors, which means that we're one of the larger investors. We're helping to pull together syndicates of investors around these companies, and we're typically on the boards of directors of them. Since 1987, we've invested in over 430 companies. These are statistics relating to outcomes or liquidity events. We've had just short of 60 companies that have gone public on their own, and about 130 companies that have been acquired by a larger, typically publicly traded company, which is the way that we get liquidity. And in the investment business, you obviously have to make money for your investors to feel good about you and wanting to keep giving you money into the future. So you saw that. Just a couple of slides on other people. This is the group of general partners that manage the current fund. This changes a little bit sort of with each and every fund as we have new people coming up and certain older people like myself who will roll off. Just a little bit on backgrounds. You don't have to read all of this, but this is the team that works on the technology side of the house. A lot of technical degrees, business training of some sort or another, maybe an MBA, maybe consulting experience, lots of operating experience. When young people ask me or my partners, how do I get into the venture capital business today? The way you do it is to get a strong education in technology and business and then go work for a startup company. That's where we go to recruit our talent. So younger people like this, we pull them out of the types of companies that we're typically investing in. Healthcare team, these folks work on a lot of science in drugs and biologicals. A lot of the decision making that takes place has to do with, will the science work when it goes through the FDA clinical trial process? So we have several MDs, we have people who are PhDs, lots and lots of science knowledge as it relates to those types of compounds. So let me stop there. How much time do we have?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. I'm going to stop there. That's kind of a flyover on Canaan. Other questions? Yeah.
What cut do you guys take?
What cut do we take?
Yeah.
So the way the industry works is that when a venture capital fund is formed, like Canaan 10, the limited partners, those institutions, will put in the majority of the capital. So typically they'll put in, call it, anywhere from 95 to 99% of the capital. The balance is put in by the general partner. So we write checks and put that into the fund too. We have skin in the game. Then that money is invested over time, and where we, the general partner, make money is that profits tend to get split anywhere between 80-20 and 70-30. So let's just take a 75-25 split. That means that you put out $1 in investment, it returns $5. The $4 profit goes 75% back to the institutional investors, 25% into our pockets. That's where we make a lot of money over time, is on the things that really win. So we have a very, very strong motivation to see significant appreciation in the stock that we buy in these startup companies. Make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So with regards to like the board for these startups, I know you mentioned that you guys were also on the board. Are the investors who give you guys money also on this board too? So it's just you guys? Okay.
No. The structure of the industry is there's general partners and limited partners. So institutions like university endowments, they just provide capital. They're a limited partner. Limited means they're limited from liability. The general partner makes all decisions. They have no say in what we invest in or what we do, how we behave. We have a responsibility to act as fiduciaries, which means we have to do the right thing in terms of whatever business, ethics, moral considerations are involved. But if we do the wrong thing and we get sued, we're liable. The limited partner has no liability. So we sit on boards, they never do. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I realize you've only got about 3 minutes, but maybe you could walk through, what are you looking for when you guys decide you're going to invest in a company? What are you looking for? And then 2, if we have time, tell us about an epic fail and what you learned from it.
So what we look for is what I'll call 2 things. We look for great people and a great idea. And great people mean entrepreneurs who have a very clear sense of wanting to do something that's different, new and different than what's been done so far. So they have an innovative idea that they understand the nature of the customer or the party who will benefit from it really well. They understand what they currently do today and why their idea is better. So they've got a really good sense of why this should be embraced with a sense of enthusiasm once you bring it to that group. The classic example of a consummate entrepreneur in terms of having that vision and really understanding how to convince people about something new and different is Steve Jobs. Think about the way he visualized his product concepts, the way he brought those ideas to the marketplace and got people to embrace new things like an iPhone or the iPod with iTunes connected to it, etc. So we look for great people. The great idea is all about something. It can either be a product or a service that's different. It has to be unique, different than everything else that exists today, and it has to be perceived as valuable. And valuable means that, we all go through life every day. Nothing's really broken, right? We're kind of going to school, we go to work, we have food to eat, everything's working okay, but a startup company that you've never heard of before wants to step in front of you, grab your attention and say, try this. And in order to do that, whoever it is that's being asked to consider that, whether it's a consumer or a corporate entity, they have to be able to look at it and say, wow, if that's really true, that could be a lot better for us. Maybe, you get longer battery life on your phone, or a corporation is able to cut their costs by 20%. or you get faster time to market, or whatever. There's lots of ways of measuring benefits, but those have to be, really readily apparent. An epic failure is where we and the entrepreneurs that we were backing didn't have clearly aligned goals.
All right, round of applause for Mr. Brown.